So I had one of my followers ask me for tips on sequels and focusing ideas. Since I answered this question, I do have more stuff on sequels that I will put up later. But this is just kind of a short answer to these things. So they asked, they said one of those people, this person's one of those people who tends to have a lot of ideas from the get-go, but then has a hard time deciding what's just a fun idea to do and or maybe to use in a sequel for another book, and like what really needs to go trying to decide what really needs to go in the story. And so they were just looking for some tips. So one of the problems that, or seemingly it's a problem that I run into in brainstorming, is like I get a bunch of ideas and suddenly I think I have to pick, either pick this idea or that idea. But most of the time I found for me, I can use both ideas. So if you have a lot of ideas, try to see if you can use most of them or if you can stack them and make them fit together. With that said, though, there is a point where you have to kind of stop yourself or your story's going to be like longer than Lord of the Rings, which isn't a bad thing, but most writers aren't looking to write stories that long, and it's difficult to sustain an audience for that long. There's also times when you don't want to use like all of your ideas. For example, if you're writing like a medieval fantasy, you might not want to throw in like time traveling aliens, after you already have like a quest story for the main plot, because time traveling aliens just don't fit in. So for sequels, a good technique to kind of help with that is to look at how you can broaden or deepen your storyline so that the conflict goes farther or deeper than the book before, than the last installment. So if in book 1 a town is threatened by a villain, in book 2 make the whole country threatened by a villain. In book 3 you can make the whole world threatened. So to make it deeper, you look for ways to make the conflict in book 2 more personal than the conflict in book 1. So say you're writing a sequel to like a detective book. Perhaps in book 1 the detective had to solve a case for a citizen. In book 2 he has to solve a case for his own daughter. So, and like that's just an example, because I know a lot of detective stories, they'd fit both of those in the same volume, but that's just an illustration of how things can get more personal or kind of broaden. So you can broaden and deepen a storyline at the same time, right? So maybe in like the second book, the detective has to solve a case that involves multiple cities and his daughter's life. Another technique is to make the villain who was defeated in book 1, turn out to be the pawn of an even larger villain that the heroes didn't know about. So some series are simply like episodic, and the sequel doesn't need to be better. It just needs to be as good as the first book, or different, as good as but different. Most TV shows are like this. Each episode has its own little story. We might have like our favorite episodes, but it's just preference. So to help focusing, I would just say pick one conflict to be the main conflict, another to be like the secondary, and onward. What belongs in the story kind of depends on what kind of story you are writing. So maybe consider that, like, is this a story that's more focused about like the character or the theme or an idea, on and on. In fact, you can Google what's called the Mice quotient. This comes from Orson Scott Card, and that might help you figure out what kind of story you are telling and what to focus on. So I hope that helps with everyone. Anyone who else who has these questions. And that's it for today. You can get my latest writing tips at septembercfox.com. Thanks!